Winx has been around for a very long time now, and throughout its time it has accrued quite a number of controversies. This video is a first in a series where I'm going to be analysing the drama, the media coverage, the fandom theatrics, the academia, and you can trust there'll be lots of personal opinion too. Consider it my contribution to Winxology. Some of it has been partially covered, some of it is untapped gold. But I hope to bring you fresh tea every time. So without further ado, we begin with the storm that was brewing even before the first Winx episode aired. The similarities between the Winx and W.I.T.C.H franchises have long been noted by fans of both. They can both be described as magical girl franchises, both Italian creations, both initially about 5 girls who followed fairly standard character archetypes. It has been the cause of both fandom drama and even legal troubles for Winx's father company, Rainbow SPA, then SRL. I've seen it covered here and there on YouTube, but as someone who has been painstakingly picking my way through fan forums since I had access to a computer, I feel like they haven't covered the half of it. There is a lot of tea to be had. To be clear, in this video I won't be comparing the shows themselves, as to be honest I haven't read W.I.T.C.H again as an adult, and I've never seen the show. This is going to be about the circumstances surrounding the creation of both, about the conspiracy theories, the fandom drama, and the coverage over the years. All the information in this video is based on what is available to the public on the internet, and are only accurate to the best of my ability, and none of it is intended to be malicious. For me, this is all part of the lore and therefore the fun of Winx, but I am aware that for some people, especially the people who may be involved, it is unpleasant business. Once again, this is just meant to be light-hearted and fun. Let's begin with the timeline. W.I.T.C.H published its first comic in the spring of 2001, the brainchild of 3, 2 of whom were Barbara Canepa and Alessandro Barbucci. Their concept was to create a story about adolescence without reinterpreting it through the lens of adulthood. Their primary inspirations came from shoujo manga, which Barbucci describes as exploring that time of childhood that Westerners around the time of W.I.T.C.H's inception tried to hide instead. Barbucci and Canepa conceived of W.I.T.C.H alongside Elisabetta Agnone, the then director of so-called girls' publications at Disney. Oh yes, W.I.T.C.H is owned by Disney, so I'm sure you can begin to predict the nature of the drama that went down. When W.I.T.C.H fans accused the Winx Club of being a cheetah brand, Winx fans will bring up the fact that despite first hitting the screens in 2004, Winx was already in the works in 1999. Meaning if one copied the other, it had to be the other way round. But no. In truth, W.I.T.C.H was conceived of in the June of '97, and the creators had to fight an extremely skeptical managerial system and work with a tiny budget. For 3 years, the creators had to work on it in secret, say Canepa and Barbucci, until finally Agnone pitched it to the higher-ups and W.I.T.C.H finally hit the stands, and became an overnight success. Unfortunately, the creators say that after only 1 issue, W.I.T.C.H was out of their creative control. The direction became, in their translated words, more feminine and less introspective. For years, Canepa and Barbucci had trouble being acknowledged as the creators of the comic. For a long time, the only creator properly attributed was Agnone, and to a certain degree, Francesco Artibani. A lot seems to have gone down, including a lawsuit about proper credit attribution, which led to the two leaving the Disney company. But the 2017 reprints acknowledge Canepa and Barbucci as the original creators, as well as Agnone. Canepa and Barbucci have continued to co-create comics, including Monster Allergy and Sky Doll. As for Winx, we all know it as Rainbow's most successful franchise, catapulting this small animation company from Italy's Marche region to international success, and crowning its creator Eugenio Straffi, Italy's Walt Disney. But when it was first conceived of, it was very different to the Winx Club we know and love today. It was the story of 5 magical girls, Bloom, Flora, Sasha, Tina, and Lisa, who attended a boarding school for magic in a castle. Of this early incarnation, there has been very little footage released, but from what little we can see, it seems aesthetically closer to Harry Potter than to the glittery space opera it became. Rainbow worked on animating what was then known as Magical Bloom between 1999 and 2001, and pitched it to Rai. Rai was interested in the project, and in early 2002, Magical Bloom met test audiences to a generally positive reception. The test viewers enjoyed the concept of the show, however were critical of the animation, which for 2002 looked old-fashioned and dull. So despite the investment and excellent plans for the show, Eugenio Straffi scrapped everything. Straffi describes this time period as his crisis, and fans have often speculated that it may actually have been due to the rising popularity of W.I.T.C.H at the time. At this point, Disney had already commissioned a W.I.T.C.H cartoon of 52 half-hour episodes. The first test viewing would be in 2003. So with an already popular series with a similar concept out there, Straffi and Rainbow had to move to freshen up and distinguish their magical girls from the others. Says Straffi in a forum entry in 2008 against allegations of plagiarism, "If anything, the basic inspiration is common to both, from Harry Potter and Strehe, or Charmed, the Right Due show, etc. Once a Disney comic came out, it was our care to keep away from them. In fact, those who have followed the adventures of Winx Club will have realized that in the end, they look more like The Lord of the Rings than Witch." Over the years, Straffi has also referred to Sailor Moon as a basic inspiration. And I'd like to take a moment to point out that that is fine. All creations have their inspirations. Magical Bloom became Winx Just Fairies, and then finally just Winx, or the Winx Club. Rainbow consulted with designers from Prada to update the Winx designs, who not only revamped the wardrobes, but also the color palette. It was also at this time that it was decided to diversify the appearance of the fairies to, quote, widen the show's ethnic diversity along the lines of universally appealing pop groups such as All Saints and the Spice Girls. In fact, it's been suggested that the Spice Girls may be the actual inspirations behind the Winx Girls, rather than the American celebrities Straffi would incessantly list in the following years. But we'll get to that in a moment. The designers also worked on merchandising, for which Rainbow, quote, assembled a much more comprehensive style guide, including spring-summer and fall-winter apparel collections for each of the main characters, after merchandising mishaps with their earlier show, Tommy and Oscar. Working with fashion designers really seems to have paid off for them, though they were not the first to do it. Winx's contemporary French-made Totally Spies also had fashion designers involved. As in 2003, Rainbow had already signed 20 European licensees for toys and back-to-school SKUs, Giochi Preziosi, stickers, Panini, audio-video, Universal, trading cards, Upper Deck, and a magazine with a comic book, Carlsen. In late 2003, the first issue of the Winx comic was due, and the following year, Season 1 began to air. So, just to refresh memories, W.I.T.C.H was conceived of in 1997, registered in 2000, first published in 2001, and started airing in 2004. Winx was conceived in 1999, registered under that name in 2003, and first published in the same year, and started airing in 2004. In their Witch video, Unicorn of War refers to the fandom drama between Winx and Witch as magical girl properties not being allowed to coexist. And I cackled when I heard that because, oh honey, you had to be there. It goes much deeper than that. Let's begin with the inspirations behind the characters. For years, Rainbow has stuck to the mantra, and in my opinion to a detriment, that Bloom is inspired by Britney Spears, Flora by J.Lo, Stella by Cameron Diaz, Musa by Lucy Liu, etc., etc. Straffi has also listed other inspirations for the girls, including his own wife Joanne Lee, and an inspiration for Bloom has always been a girl that Straffi knew in university who had been adopted by American parents. And I also do remember as a child coming across the information that the real inspiration behind Flora was Barbara Chiappini. In that latter case, as an adult, I do think that's quite bizarre and it's probably not true. Believe it or not, the inconsistencies in listed inspirations were and continue to be a point of controversy in the fandom. Of course, it's not really an inconsistency. You can get inspired by multiple things. But that's not quite the issue. All the fans were familiar with the initial conception of Winx. The original appearances of the Winx characters have absolutely nothing to do with these celebrities. Even the 2004 versions, in both appearance and personality, have nothing to do with these celebrities. And why would a proudly Italian production that has over the years always made a point of stressing how Italian, how European it is, and has always rivaled itself against Disney, whose success they see almost like a foreign invasion, use American celebrities as their inspiration for their teen girl cartoon? I mean, it's obvious. This is a marketing scheme. The first mentions of these celebrity inspirations go back to around 2005, so far as I can tell. Before 2005, they mostly mentioned the aforementioned pop groups in press releases and promo material. And it becomes a really highlighted point around 2011, when Winx was looking to re-break into the American market. Even Straffi himself claims late in the game they surveyed young girls for film stars and singers they liked, and tried to match them up, but that the real Winx are distinct and individual. They are original characters. But some people suggest that this is actually a smokescreen to cover up the fact that the real inspirations behind these characters are W.I.T.C.H. When you put Winx characters next to W.I.T.C.H characters, you can almost match them up one-to-one, apparently. Like I said, I'm not actually as familiar with W.I.T.C.H. This was even noted by several academic papers on diversity in children's media I was reading for an upcoming part. I would just say though, I actually don't think this is that implausible. I don't mean that Rainbow sat down to read the Witch comics, took notes, and shamelessly ripped off characters, but more that I can imagine how Witch may have had an influence in Rainbow's decision to diversify their characters. I'm sure at one point the team behind Winx had to sit down and discuss Witch and how and why it was doing well, and how they might in turn be able to separate their own brand and stand out. And at that point, it does seem as though one primary appeal Witch had over Magical Bloom is the diversity of its main characters. Others are less generous. Many point to Musa with her pigtails and indigo hair as an obvious copy of Haylin. When you compare Musa to Lisa, does it look bad? Or Aisha, who was added in later, athletic and musical, perhaps like Tirani? Or the superficial similarities between Stella and Cornelia? But that's just it. From what I can tell, beyond borrowing from the same character archetypes, or even stereotypes, these are different characters. As for the so-called damning Musa case, I think honestly it's easier to accuse Rainbow of recycling designs rather than copying someone else's. This is Yukari, by the way, from Rainbow's at the time already very successful Tommy and Oscar. It's also worth pointing out that the personalities of the Witch Girls are actually quite different between the comics and the show, and the similarities fans talk about are more applicable to the show versions of the Witch Girls than the comic versions. And at the time Rainbow was developing Winx, the show did not exist yet. It's worth mentioning that another point of contention in the fandom were the comics. The Witch magazines had distinguished themselves in the girls' magazine and comics sector by being somewhat atypical. At its inception, they seem to have been less girly, for lack of a better word, and more mysterious, skirting around topics of esotericism like tarot, tea leaves, horoscopes, etc. Well, at its inception, the Winx magazine also played around with this. Dream interpretation, herbal remedies, soft esotericism, and the like. Here is an excerpt from Winx's front page that used to host horoscopes. Someone from your past, very adept at weaving magical auras, is in front of you again. It is up to your heart to decide whether to trust him or not. Me weaving magical auras to restore Winx to its 2007 glory. Over the years, Straffi has taken little jabs at Witch, as one might probably expect. One thing he has stressed over the years is the positive influence of Winx, that they are good characters, good influences compared to other contemporaries, going as far as to call the Winx the clean version of Bratz, representing goodness as opposed to witches who represent evil and have associations with esotericism. the Winx represent good, and they fight evil. Well, here we see what a businessman he is. Because in truth, even in his own cartoon, it is noted that the difference between evil and good is not aesthetic. The witches in Winx aren't inherently evil, they just source their magic differently. Their philosophy is different, and that leads to disagreements with fairies, but when it comes to fighting evil, they show up. And what about the so-called witches of Witch, who have always used their powers for good? So, when even his own magazine plays around with this stuff, clearly these comments are not actually directed at fans, or even meant to be representations of what he actually thinks. This is just for concerned parents who are distressed by their little daughter reading a comic that has a pendulum in it, and wish to wean them off onto something quote-unquote better. It's marketing. But it doesn't end there. Winx over the years has been caught several times stealing designs or artwork or choreography, and back in the early 2000s, they seem to have, and keyword is seen, to have been caught several times borrowing from Witch. Here's the only example I could find, though I know others exist. I know it sounds like I'm defending Rainbow every step of the way, but it's because I think I'm right, okay? At least in this case. I know art bases have a lot of drama surrounding them, but at the most basic level, it's not unusual for artists to refer to, or even use as a base, already extant photos or even drawings. At the time, Rainbow was in many ways still a baby company, working with a budget the fraction of Disney's. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think this is evil. Furthermore, several waves of Disney Italy employees have over time switched over to Rainbow, or have worked with or for the company in some capacity, including Francesco Artivani, Bruno Enna, who were both key contributors to Witch, by the way, and, Canepa and Barbucci. The Monsterology TV series was co-produced by Rainbow. So, the artistic teams behind Winx and Witch have heavy overlap. They probably even share animators and artists. Straffi's habit of taking little jabs at Witch has over the years alienated some fans, and in their eyes made this whole Winx copied Witch ordeal more plausible. But I'd like to offer another theory. I'm probably wrong, and it's not like making excuses for capitalists gets you into heaven, but I'd like to suggest that given what we know about how badly things ended between Disney and the creative team behind Witch, and the fact that a lot of them went on and continue to work with Rainbow, could his disdain for the Disney franchise stem from genuine personal grievances on behalf of colleagues, rather than a petty capitalist grudge? Is that optimistic of me? I think it might be a little, but still worth considering. The final point worth mentioning in this whole saga is the lawsuit, of course. In 2004, Disney attempted to sue Rainbow for trademark infringement. But, so far as I can tell, not for the whole of the franchise as it is often implied, but because of the logo and aesthetics of the product specifically. Brands will often use a similar name and or design of an extant product in order to parasitically profit from its success, and this is what Disney was accusing Rainbow of doing. This is an important distinction, because you can have an original idea, but have dishonest tactics for selling your product. Those two things can coexist. I'm not saying that's what happened, and obviously legally that is also not how it played out. But I think sometimes, especially on the Winx side of fandom, when we're debating this topic, the argument gets reduced to, actually the stories are very different, and you're just not letting properties intended for girls coexist. When the actual question was whether or not Rainbow was using the aesthetics of Witch to confuse consumers into buying Winx. So, is there any credibility to this? Well, Winx went from Magical Bloom to the Winx Club in 2003, and the intermittent logo, for me at least, does raise some questions. But the basic inspiration behind the name and logo of Winx is very simple. In an interview in 2010, Straffi confirmed that they had initially tried to copyright wings, naturally as they are the distinguishing feature of Fairies. Netflix take notes. But the rights to this word had already been taken, so they chose Winx, which could be read as wings, with the X in the logo serving to look like the aforementioned appendages. Disney naturally lost that lawsuit, but apparently not because Rainbow proved that they'd been working on Winx since '99, like we often hear, but because the brands were not judged to be similar enough, if I understand correctly, that is. At any rate, I'm sure that this early attempt to squander a rival by Disney did not help Straffy's contempt for Witch. So, how do we conclude? I think that over the years, Winx and Witch have had a symbiotic relationship. How could they not, given the overlap of the creative teams? Witch may have had some inverse influence on Winx's aesthetic and design around 2002, and may have paved the way and whet the appetite for a magical girl comic and cartoon of its kind. And in its turn, the success of Winx will have had an influence over the decisions behind the Witch storylines and its marketing, such as introducing a new transformation. The overlap between the two fandoms and the international success of both franchises are testament to that effect. I only wish this could have been a rising tide lifts all boats scenario, rather than one getting squandered and the other kind of fizzling out. Slowly, but it's not looking good. I'd like to insert this here. One of the forums I've been lurking on for a long time is the Luci Ombre forum, which is a really precious resource for Winxology. And as I was finishing up this video, I realized that the creator of the forum has a YouTube channel, and in fact has covered the Winx vs. Witch situation also, in both English and Italian. In this video, they go into a lot of detail about the results of the court case, and it is very interesting. It seems Witch may have been actually done dirty, maybe not legally, but conceptually. And I hope you will check out the video to catch up on the tea. I'm pretty sure this is information that was not widely known in the fandom before, at least on the Winx side. Furthermore, the creator of these videos is also the original curator of a lot of these interviews, links, and information on that forum, often honorously translating and researching them alone, and I absolutely want to credit them properly. So I hope you will check out their channel next, and get to know about Winx from the perspective of an Italian person. In upcoming parts of this series, I will be covering Winx's relationship with the Barbie Fairytopia doll line, and some of the academic coverage the show has had over the years. Because believe it or not, Winxology is kind of a real field now. I'm also continuing work on the alternative canon of the Winx comics, and I'm also looking to branch out soon, so maybe stick around for that if you want. But for now, I think the next video will be about Season 2 of Fate. It was an interesting experience, and I have some thoughts. I'd love to know your thoughts at this point, actually, because I've honestly not seen much coverage for it, at least as of recording, which is interesting. But that's all for now. I hope I see you next time. Bye. Bye.